Okay, now we're going to look at something called the third angles theorem, and basically it tells us if two sets of angles on one triangle are congruent to two sets of angles on the second triangle, then the third angles also have to be congruent. And we're going to use that here. And for a problem like this, it's kind of hard to see what's going on here. I want to see what BDC is. So if you get a problem like this where we have two triangles that are overlapping, the best thing for you to do is to go ahead and draw the two separately. So I'm going to draw that triangle, and hopefully it'll fix itself, or it won't. Let's try that again then. Give me 1 sec here. So I'm going to draw one triangle like this, and then the second triangle like this. And the first triangle is, give me a sec, triangle ACD. Can we see it right here? ACD. And the second triangle is BDC. So if we look at the markings, we want to mark it appropriately. So we have a marking here and a marking here. We also have a marking down here at the C, so 2 marks here, and then down at the D we have 2 markings here. So if we look carefully, they tell us that this is 45 degrees, and they tell us that this is 30 degrees. So since we know that this is 45 degrees, we also know that this has the same markings. That's also 45 degrees. And then this has 2 arcs, and it's 30 degrees, so that's also 30 degrees. If we want to find the third angle, this angle right here should equal this angle right here. In other words, 1, 2, 3 markings here, and 1, 2, 3 markings here. So those should be congruent, and that's what the third angle theorem tells us. If these two are congruent to these two, then the third angle should also be congruent. So angle, the measure of angle BDC is equal to the measure of angle ACD. And we know that since these 3 equal 180, and we would find the third angle by saying 180 minus 45 minus 30. That's the same as 180 minus 75, which is 105 degrees. So the measure of angle BDC is equal to 105. And again, they don't separate them, but I kind of like doing that just that I can visually see what's going on. We get that the angle is 105 here. Okay? And similarly, we want to write a proof for this. So we're given all of this, and we want to prove that the two triangles are congruent. So there's a lot given to us here. We have one set of sides congruent, we have 2 sets of sides congruent, and then we have one set of angles congruent, 2 sets of angles congruent. The third side is going to be AC on both triangles, so we're going to state that AC is congruent to AC because of the reflexive property. Now angle D and angle B will also be congruent because we have one set of angles congruent and 2 sets of angles congruent, so by the third angle theorem, D and B will be congruent as well. And since we have all angles and all sides congruent that are corresponding, we know the two triangles are congruent. So again, I know that I'm going to use reflexive property to show that AC is congruent to AC, and I'm going to use the third angles theorem to show that B and D are congruent. So we go through it and we do it. We start off with all the things that are given to us. We know that's true because of the reflexive property. Then we do all the angles that we know are congruent because they're given, and we write the third because of the third angle theorem, and then the two triangles are congruent because of the definition of congruent triangles. In the future, we'll have shorter ways of doing this again. Alright, so we want to know in this problem what is the measure of angle DCN. DCN is this angle right here. Um, well, we know that these two angles are congruent right here. So we know angle D is congruent to angle S, and that's because it's given. We know that angle DNC is congruent to angle R and S because vertical angles are congruent. And so therefore angle C and angle R should be congruent. So the measure of angle DCN should equal the measure of angle NRS, which is 75. And the reason for that is the third angles theorem. Okay? Again, we know those are congruent and those are congruent, so the third angles tell us that DCN is 75 degrees. Oh, and what else do we need to know in order to prove the triangles are congruent? If we go back, so far we have, what was it? Let's go back to this again. We know these are congruent, and we just found out that that was congruent to this. So we would still need to know that DN was congruent to NS and RS was congruent to DC. If we knew this, congruent to this, and if we knew this, congruent to this, then we would have enough information to prove the triangles are congruent. There we go. And that's it. Thank you.